morning to one and all. Today I am discussing the topic Introduction to JDBC and what is the working of JDBC and how to JDBC architecture are creating. First of all, JDBC means it is a Java database connectivity. What is the purpose of this JDBC means? It has to access Java programs to interact with database. Without database, you can't create any simple program on the JDBC. JDBC provides a standard way, but it can access manipulating data in various databases. Not only one type of database, you can access any different databases also. You can create a Java database connections. Let's see the example. In this Java application, first of all you have to create connected data. In this data you have to passing the query and finally we are getting the result. In this Java application, this Java driver manager has been categorized into JDBC SQLite driver, JDBC Java DB driver and JDBC drivers. These all drivers will access the DBMS database. Here DBMS database management system. In this database you are using SQLite and Java database. The architecture of JDBC means these are the two main components in the JDBC. One is JDBC API and the JDBC driver. In this JDBC API, it has to provide a set of classes and interfaces for connecting the database and executing the SQL statements. Previous slide I am explained. First of all you have to connecting the database and finally giving the queries to the database and finally we have to getting the result. Like that, the JDBC API provide a set of classes and interfaces for connecting databases and executing SQL statements. These drivers are software components and it has to implementing the JDBC API only, and it has to provide the necessary functionality to connecting a specific databases. In the previous example I am giving SQL Server, Oracle and data source. This JDBC for managing different connections and it has to executing queries and finally getting the result. These connections should be based upon only database. In this connection only you have to creating statements and managing transactions. In these statements you have to executing SQL statements and you have to retrieve the results from the Java database connectivity. And in this JDBC we are categorized into 4 drivers: type 1, type 2, type 3 and type 4. In this type 1 driver you have to directly access to the database. Without database you can't access any JDBC drivers. JDBC driver means you have to establishing a connection between specific database. Finally, type 2 drivers are combination of native code and Java classes. Means Java application program called the JDBC. In this type driver the logic will be given to the database. Type 3 driver means implemented entirely in Java, but you can use the network protocol. Why? Because you have to communicate with the middleware server. Type 4 driver means you have to entirely in Java, but it should be communicate only database with using a network protocol. Without network protocol you can't access and communicate with the type 4 driver. How to working with JDBC? JDBC connectivity means to develop a relational database and it provides a set of classes and interfaces and execute SQL statements also, and whenever you have to retrieve the data you can using the concept JDBC. In this JDBC allows database connectivity for different database systems. Why? Because it has to developing the Java database connection. How to connect a database? To establish a connection the database you can use simply class.forName method. This is the connecting of database. And how to these drivers are loading? Driver manager.get connection method. Whenever this statement will be given, the database URL, username, password also the user can set it. The connection object represents the user can pass as the SQL queries and statements. How to executing the SQL statements. Connection dot create statement. Whenever this line you passing the JDBC, finally the execution procedure will be started. The statement dot executive method means you have to execute some SQL statements like that insert statement, update statement or delete statement. These are all are used in the executing SQL statements. To execute SQL queries, statement dot execute query method. Whenever you are passing the database queries, you can use this line method, statement dot execute query method. And how to prepare statement? It is a subclass of this statement for the JDBC, and you have to access multiple times with different parameter values. Whenever you are giving SQL statements, it can access multiple times for multiple execution. And how to handling these exceptions in the Java database connectivity. Finally, in the previously we have learned that exception handling means it is having try, catch, throws finally. Like that, in the Java database also you can use try, catch block, but SQL exception that may occur during database operations. Whenever you are passing the database operation, you can use handling exception. Otherwise, this exception can't work in the database connectivity. And finally, you have to closing connection, statement and result set. Finally, you have to closing that method. And what is a network and remote method innovation? Here, network and remote method innovation means finally the technology communicate with machines only. In Java programming means finally Java virtual machine, the byte code can be converted into machine understandable code. Like that, in the network concept, you have to convert remote method innovation. It is a client server application, not a server application. Client server application means it is a TCP protocols will be used, and this working of RMI is the client invokes the method stub. Each stub is working in this Java database connectivity means sending a request to the server, not a response. Client working is sending a request to the server, but the server receives the request and execute this method. Finally, the output return back to the client. What are the benefits of RMI means? You have to design applications on different machines, and it is a high level configuration for communication between different objects. But finally, remote method innovation means finally depend on the network communication only, not on Java database connection. RMI architectures are three components: client side, server side, register side. Client side means the response will be giving remote method on the server. The server means it acts like as a host, like admin position. The admin will give the request, the client will be accepted that connection. And this RMI exception means you can give three types of exception: remote exception, not bound exception, access exception. The meaning, actual meaning is the exception means error. The error will solve the exception handling only, but not these errors are compile time errors, runtime errors. These remote method innovation means communication between protocols, not a database connections. Not bound exception means the client, it can throws the remote object, but not in registered side, not on server side. Only the client will total caring about this not bound exception, access exception. In this client bound exception should not include register and server side. And what is the security of RMI means? These are, you have to easily authentication and encryption the data. Whenever you have to authenticate, first of all you have to check the authorized client or not. Unauthorized client means your data will be lost. Encryption protects the confidential and integrity of the data between the communication between the client and the server. And what is the performance means? It is a serialization concept will be worked in the remote method innovation, but in this remote method innovation you having the limit minimizing, that not maximizing. You can use only minimizing connections, and it is the data will reduce the network latency on the RMI performance. Comparing the RMI and other remote communication technologies means RMI is the higher level configuration based on the other remote like technologies like sockets or web services. Whether RMI is the Java language, it is an object oriented remote method innovation, and finally it is a platform independent. It can be only used in the XML based protocol for communications. Coming to limitations of RMI, the client and server to run on JVM but not in database connections. RMI performance depends upon the network condition only but not higher performance or lower performance on these applications. And finally, coming to conclusion, these network and remote method innovation can be technology distributing computing in Java, and this communication between objects and different JVMs, and these limitations and performance of RMI is developing distributed applications in Java ecosystems. Thank you.